Molly and Kyle, how you guys doing today?
Good, thank you.
Great, man. Thank you.
Yeah, very excited to have you guys on today. I'm actually right now I'm taking a swig of my Keto Brains. Have it in. It's mixed with coffee and protein powder. That's kind of been like, oh, you got it too. You got your coffee. Man, I
Buenos
gotta get me
dias.
one of those
That's how we
coffee
do.
mugs. Look at that thing.
We need more. That was a
Yeah.
that was a test run.
Shameless self promotion.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's been kind of like my go-to. I've been doing it, I'll mix it in with like just regular coffee too, but it's kind of like an afternoon thing for me where I'll do like a little bit of protein powder. I'll do, like 6 to 8 ounces of coffee, a scoop of Keto Brains, and it's like the best thing to get through. I've also noticed that it's been great in the mornings. Like I like to do a little bit of fasting here and there, but I also like to get, kind of that protein modified fast where get a little bit of protein in during that too. So I've been loving that too because, the MCTs and everything, the Keto Brain just feels like it helps me, extend that fast a little bit longer. So long story short, I've been digging Keto Brains, which is why I'm so
Yeah.
excited to have you guys on today to kind of tell us the story.
Awesome.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's
Definitely.
so many ways to leverage it, and I love that you just kind of covered like three of the primary ways. It's like for extending fasting, for starting your morning, for that midday. Like I have a busy life, I have a whole nother life to live the rest of the day.
Yeah.
It's great, and it's great to hear how people integrate it into their life. So it's
Yeah.
exciting for us to hear.
Totally.
Yeah. And I'm
Absolutely.
hoping that
Well, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm hoping that we'll get more, from this podcast too. We're going to have a lot more people in my audience taking this product. So it'll be really fun to see how it's kind of working with them. That's one of the cool things that
And
is I always get a lot of feedback on that. People always tell me like what they're experiencing, which is kind of one of my favorite parts of, recommending products. So I want to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves to all of the listeners. But before we do, I'll just kind of tee it up as, one of the things that I've talked about as this season started and we've brought on sponsors is that I don't ever take on a sponsor for anything that I don't take. And it's not even just things that I like. I think a lot of times podcasts will have on sponsors of things that they like. I agree with the product; it's good, but for me, it's got to be something that I'm using in my day to day. And as I just highlighted, this is something that I'm using every single day, sometimes twice a day, depending on what I need to get into that day. So I've been just a really big fan, and I think you guys have created something amazing here. So would love to just give a chance for you guys to introduce yourselves to the audience, and just by way of Molly, you're on my right, so we can start with you, and then we can get to Kyle after that.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Molly. I've been in this industry for about 20 years, the industry of like natural wellness. I ended up in this industry because I was a fat kid, and then I was an obese teenager, and then I was the classic American gonna have an eating disorder person. And at 24, which is 22 years ago now, I had to figure out what health was or start that process. And that's not a 1 day process, 2 day process, or 10-year process. So my curiosity about where does health live? What is health? How do I find this thing? Started this really long journey that, 5 years ago had me in a job where I had a friend who told me to listen to this podcast with this guy named Dom D'Agostino. And, my mind was blown, and I tried keto, not at that point for anything having to do with weight loss. That had been dialed for years, but I was just immediately entranced by what keto could do for a mammal. And I wanted all of what keto potentially offered for longevity, for inflammation reduction, choosing to try keto, getting into keto, and then feeling what keto felt like was insane because I tried every nootropic, I'd played with every supplement. It was the industry I came from, and there was literally no match for what this physiological state of switching fuel substrates gave me. And I didn't even know I was looking for anything for further clarity. So that kind of started me on the road of keto, as everyone has done who's in this space. You get your bulletproof C8 MCT oil, and you put your water in your coffee, and you do the whole thing, and it's a delicious, wonderful mess. And, that eventually led to using the C8 MCT powder, and then my coffee, as many of our coffees do, became the delivery device for all manner of supplements. So every morning I was opening up capsules of exactly the right, nootropics and nutrition that I wanted and mixing it in my coffee with the MCT. Keto Brainz ultimately came out of that, but Keto Brainz really did come out of all of those years of me being in an industry where, you name it, I've tried it. Vegan, vegetarian, no fat, low fat, high fat, every supplement you can imagine. Kyle along for the ride the whole time. Kyle, you got to try this. Put this in your mouth. Take this.
I'm the guinea pig. As a little brother, I benefited kind of adjacently because of her excitement. I
Yeah.
think the first thing I ended up taking because of her, and I don't know how young people are when they start taking supplements, but I think I was taking vitamin E and vitamin D,
I gave you
vitamin B
when you were
at
like
like 12
14.
years old, 13, 14, 14 probably. I was
Yeah.
eighth grade. And like taking supplements as a eighth grader, I was like pure trust. I have no idea what this is. This is
Right.
ridiculous. I'm just going to take it because I trust you. But that was the
Mhm.
foundation for her getting deeper and deeper and developing a more sophisticated knowledge and experience set that she could turn into practical approaches to feeling better or addressing various
Well,
discomforts or maladies.
that right there, I think what you just said is, after all of those years of, you don't know where to start. You just know that you're not feeling right, so you
It
try.
can be overwhelming as well.
It can
It
be
is overwhelming
overwhelming.
initially.
But the idea is, I firmly believe everyone can find a dialed place to live from in their mind and in their body. And I do believe everyone can feel amazing. And at the heart of Keto Brainz is, I think, the number one thing you have to have as a human to live life well is a brain you can trust to
Mhm.
move through the day, to accomplish what you have on your plate, to think clearly through difficulties, to have the brain power just to, get through the kind of days humans have these days, because
Mhm.
most of us aren't living one life. Most of us have a personal life and one job and perhaps another job. And I do believe we can be highly functional within that most of the time. But that took years of, you try one thing and you feel great because you swung your dopamine up over here, and you try another thing and, oh, I feel great now, but then your GABA is down over here.
But what
And
you just said right there, like that conversation makes no sense to somebody who hasn't tried this yet. So
Yeah.
again, just letting them know it's not like this, that it's not this magic that you have to learn. It's you just go find the information or find someone with whom you can communicate and who can turn complex things into more digestible bits for you to like onboard to you. And then you
Yeah.
start making those connections of how to make simple changes and you can then it just becomes natural. Then it's like that's your default mode is like, well, how is this going to affect the way I feel
yeah.
Mhm.
physically,
Yeah.
mentally, otherwise, whatever.
And
Yeah,
I
and
went
I
on a
feel like it's such a
crazy.
big thing where like, everybody's baseline nowadays is not very healthy, right? Like a lot of us have become accustomed to not feeling well, almost to the point where we don't even notice that we don't feel well, right? And that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I think so interesting about keto is that, a lot of times when people follow keto within, a few weeks they start to kind of feel this kind of sickness lifted off of them almost where now they start feeling a little bit of mental clarity. And it feels crazy, but honestly, it's probably just them getting back to baseline because they've never experienced that before. They start
Mm-hmm.
feeling a little bit more stabilization in their mood and their hunger levels and all of those things. And it's amazing, right? And then it's like I think once you get to that point, then you start becoming a little bit more sensitive to things that affect your wellness. Like once you've seen the light, it's hard to go backwards. I feel where,
Yes.
and that's even where I think a product like this is so great because once you know what it feels like to feel well, you've kind of established a new baseline, and then now you take a product
Absolutely.
that is going to kind of just enhance that baseline more. It's going to just give you that even extra edge.
Yep.
So which I guess is one of the questions that I wanted to ask for you guys too is we have like C8s in this product and which for anybody who's not super familiar, which I feel like most people on this podcast probably are pretty familiar, but C8 is one of the MCTs. And it is a little bit more rapidly digested than the other MCTs by way of it being a little bit shorter than, say, C10 or C12. So we know that C8 is very ketogenic. It can convert to ketones. But does Keto Brainz, because of that, is it a product that is kind of set for ketogenic dieters specifically? Could you be a non-keto dieter and still benefit from taking the product? What's your guys' stance on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because Keto Brainz is for everyone. Keto Brainz is for anyone looking to optimize their cognitive function or optimize their day. And yes, the base is the C8 MCT because, as you said, we're going to help stimulate the liver's production of ketone bodies. But the idea is even those who are not in ketosis, again, the idea of your coffee being the delivery device for so many things, whether people are using mud water or Four Sigmatic or Laird's, like you name it, coffee has become not only our coffee, but a place to sneak in extra nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Keto Brainz offers people a way to, instead of taking a handful of nootropics and trying to figure out exactly which nootropic to take along with which other one, and take that handful along with their coffee that might have cream or butter or soy milk or whatever people are putting in their coffee. Keto Brainz is for anyone looking to simplify their morning, have their coffee still taste amazing because we love coffee, and coffee needs
maybe better.
Even better. Yeah. So basically, if you enjoy coffee with cream, if you enjoy bulletproof coffee, if you enjoy having a clear brain, Keto Brainz is for everyone. And, we have had some discussions around, well, should we take keto out of the name? And I'm 100% no on that because I think there's a big conversation to be had, and it's happening more about leveraging the ketogenic state and using it as a tool, even if you're not keto all the time. So there are people who, whether it's the right way or not, are not keto. They're still, consuming the carbohydrates and the sugar, but they're tiptoeing into intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is far more difficult for individuals who are not fat adapted because they're going to experience their brain hollering at them to take some sort of glycogen. I have some friends at my gym right now who started using Keto Brainz, and they're experiencing that as they're trying to go into a cut. They're, asking for advice on the brain fog and the grumpiness. And I was like, if we're not going to have a conversation around fat adapting, let's have a conversation around extending your intermittent fast and leveraging Keto Brainz in your coffee for that purpose. And, so multiple uses for multiple people, and it really is for anyone. Even black coffee drinkers, I can't tell you how many people who are like, I really want to try your product, but I never add anything to my coffee. And we convert them very quickly because while caffeine feels amazing, caffeine plus alpha GPC and L-theanine and lion's mane is a whole different feeling than your caffeine alone. And the caffeine and theanine, they work together for an even better cognitive state. So really, for anyone looking to optimize, irrespective of their dietary ideology, it just happens to be called Keto Brainz because one of the other funny things that happens when you're in deep ketosis is you get really creative and you want to start lots of businesses all at once because you have all of this energy. So the name Keto Brainz,
the genesis of the brand.
It came out of what happened when he and I are in the same room with like 3 to 5 millimole of ketones. I mean, he's had time
on the verge of evaporating. Like literally, there's not much keeping us on the ground. It's unreal.
Start businesses and call me and be like, sister, what did I do? Why do I have all of this happening? I was like, you're not in keto anymore, are you? Like, you need to get back.
So you talked about, you started, and it's like a lot of people, not a lot, but we hear this anecdotally. We've heard it at least a few times that you notice it when you run out.
Yeah.
Very simple. It's like if you're a first time user, you add it, you kind of get used to it, you notice it. And I don't know if anybody tries it for the first time and doesn't feel it. We can talk more specifically about who is going to feel it more strongly, more likely, related to choline later. Totally just walked down a tangent and I lost my way.
Well, I do want to get into that part about the choline, especially because if I'm honest, that's the part that I like most about the product. I have tried. I was very big into ingredients early on. The university that I went to, I had a couple buddies who were studying a lot of different ingredients. Have good friends who are formulators, so I've tried almost every nootropic on the market. But prior to Keto Brainz, the only thing that I had ever found that really did it for me was just simply alpha GPC plus caffeine. Like that combination right there has always been incredible for me. And I've always liked L-theanine as well and lion's mane, but I've usually always taken them separately. I've never taken them all together, so it was kind of unique doing that this time. But I think what's important to point out about that is like we talk about the MCTs, and most people on this podcast know what MCTs are. But of the group of those ingredients, maybe outside of lion's mane, MCTs probably have the least amount of research behind them because alpha GPC and L-theanine have so much. Like the body of evidence behind alpha GPC and L-theanine is so robust. The effectiveness ranging from relaxation, improved mood, cognitive enhancement, and then even on the alpha GPC side, sports performance, which is actually one of the first introductions I had to it, was more for power output, which there's a big body of evidence behind that too. So it really is. It's one of those like. It's very research backed. It's also efficaciously dosed, which I don't want this episode to sound like a promotion, but like this product is so well formulated because you look at a lot of nootropics out there and what a lot of them will be dependent on is caffeine or some stimulant. Yeah. And then they'll sprinkle in some things that you might have heard of more for marketing than for anything else. But when you look at the ingredient label on Keto Brainz, you see that everything is dosed to what the research supports, which the only one that I didn't know what the efficacious dose was for lion's mane. So I guess I can't speak to that one, but for alpha GPC and L-theanine, both that is the optimal dose for it. And you can yes, you can mix it with coffee to get that stimulant, but you can also experience benefits mixing it with a protein powder or a protein shake with no caffeine in it. So it's something that
right in their mouth.
Is nice. The old pre-workout method, right?
Melts
just
in
down
your
the
mouth
hatch.
because it's mostly MCT and coconut milk powder, so it just melts immediately.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't even think about that. I might have to try that next.
You'll have to. It just tastes good. Whenever we get a fresh batch, even though I 100% trust how our co-packer is going to do, there's always this anxiety over, is it right? So we have to, we rip up the bag where we're at and just stick my finger in there because I'm sorry, I need to immediately know it's just right. So
yeah.
Standing in a parking lot, people are walking by and we're pouring powder into each other's mouths.
Right.
The back of a car.
These guys look sketchy. What's going on here?
100%. I'm always giving it to my friends. I'm like, oh yeah, I've been working on this. It's so funny. It was even funnier before we had bags and labels because it was just
right.
little bags of powder. Here you go. There you go.
That's
so
Great.
Funny.
I do want to. So you made the mention of the choline. I'm curious on that, and especially because so my grandmother recently, about a month ago, passed away from Alzheimer's, and so I've just become a lot more interested in Alzheimer's, and one of the things that I've kind of started getting into more recently is the role that choline plays, especially in people who have the APOE4 allele, which puts them at that increased risk for Alzheimer's. So outside of that, I've kind of been operating under the assumption if you have that gene alteration, a choline source like alpha GPC, and also, whole food sources of choline is going to be really good for your health. But I didn't realize that there are other situations where somebody would maybe get more out of choline. You mentioned that, Kyle. So what's going on there?
Well, what's interesting about that is before I had ever thought to get my DNA run, before I knew anything about the few SNPs that I feel confident speaking on, over the years of me being in the supplement industry, becoming a nutritionist, selling supplements, working with people, Kyle and I had landed on SAMe feeling really good and alpha GPC feeling really good. And those were just things that felt good. And B vitamins were like, okay, this is our stack. And come to find out, we have virtually every MTHFR mutation for having poor choline utilization and absorption.
Oh, wow.
We share a lot of genetic similarities. So we have an N of 2 kind of very loosely. But so she has a good idea that if something is working well for her, there's a good chance if I experience something similar, there's a good chance it might have a similar effect.
Nice.
Well, not for sure, of course, but it's worth trying. Right?
Yeah, my understanding is that it's a fairly large portion of the population that has at least one or two of these MTHFR mutations that would lead to them having an issue with the utilization of choline. And I don't know if there's a study on this, but I wish there was. I also think about those of us who had parents who grew up during the time when saturated
100%.
fat was demonized. And we weren't supposed to eat, we weren't supposed to eat the lard anymore, or the egg yolks, or the fatty meats. So what happens when you're baking a baby in absence of the fats that it needs to develop? So the mom, the baby's brain is essentially made from the mother's brain, which is where, the pregnancy brain comes from, because you've got to build a brain from your own brain. So if you have a mom that's not consuming those necessary fats and phospholipids, and then you have a baby born with MTHFR mutations who also didn't have all of the fats that it potentially needed to develop a brain, I'm so curious to know, what that looks like for a child or an adolescent who, just maybe always thinks they are not good at focus, or maybe always has a hard time in school. And then
or smokers too, remember? Yeah, like people who get that first feeling of a dopamine experience from a cigarette or from nicotine. And they're like, oh my God, my brain works. I feel good. And they think it's, it's the cigarette and everything involved. But
so nicotine, I actually don't know. So nicotine plays a role in what? In something to do with choline?
Acetylcholine. Nicotine hits, and I'm going to mess this up and get hollered at, but it is an acetylcholine receptor.
That's how we learn.
Irvin will tell you it's a nicotine hits an acetylcholine receptor, but it has a specific name. I don't even want to say what I think it is because I'm going to mess it up. But yes, so nicotine feels so good and is a nootropic substance all by itself, because it's tickling acetylcholine receptors in a very powerful way. So what Kyle's speaking of is just, I had in my head this whole scenario, like these poor kids that grew up without proper fat. They make it to high school. Someone introduces them to a cigarette, which is horrible. But for the first time in their lives, their brain is lit up from having the proper amount of acetylcholine, or at least having acetylcholine receptors tickled for a minute. To me, that would just be a really interesting, very difficult to do epidemiological.
It would be super interesting. I'd be surprised if there wasn't someone who had because the keto diet has been researched since early 20th century, right?
Yeah.
It was like standard of care for seizures.
The nicotine thing is interesting.
Seizures.
If you dive into nicotine, apparently, like it's one of the substances known to have a positive effect on cognitive decline in Alzheimer's, but I don't think scientists are allowed to research it for that because of how it's classed. And it's so difficult to have a conversation about nicotine without people immediately thinking tobacco and cigarettes.
So hard to psychologically disentangle those two for some people, because they don't even realize that they think that nicotine is bad because of cigarettes a lot of the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, up until recently,
it's part and parcel.
It was like, you could only consume it in the form of tobacco. And then, they started coming out with like these vapes and everything, which have their own problems. Right. But, I know that more recently, nicotine gum, nicotine mints, one company, Knick Knack, which is like a nicotine mint company, they had sent me some to try.
I saw
them. They're new and they're good. When I was younger, I don't think I've ever spoke about this on the podcast, but I used to chew tobacco a lot. I grew up in the Midwest.
Where are you from again? There you go.
Illinois. Yeah. So grew up in the Midwest. I played baseball. I played baseball in college, and I was a relief pitcher. So we would have, like, the way our schedule was is we would have a doubleheader on Saturday and a doubleheader on Sunday. So we would be like 36 innings of baseball. It'd be freezing outside because it's never warm in the Midwest during baseball season. And, as a relief pitcher, I would maybe pitch 2 of those 36 innings, right? If I was lucky, maybe 3. So I just would go through so much nicotine.
That's a lot of dip.
I just always but it was interesting is that I never put the two together, but then I also realized that, if I was going for long car rides, I would want to, if I was tired, like at night, if I would put a dip in, I would feel like I had more energy. If I was like studying late at night or something, I would put a dip in. I felt like I would get more done. But I never, I always just kind of associated with, well, I'm addicted to this thing, so it just must be that I want to have it. But I never realized, up until recently that it was a nootropic. But even through understanding it was a nootropic, I had no idea that it was acting on these acetylcholine receptors, which makes a ton of sense. And I think like what you guys are saying, I think is a very interesting thought of like, if you grow up and you've never really had these receptors being activated, they've never really been optimized before, and that's your first introduction to it, like that's going to be, nicotine already feels amazing for somebody who doesn't have that issue. So I can't imagine, it for those individuals.
100%. Well, imagine if we could give, sorry to interrupt, but imagine if we could give people a nicotine experience absent the tobacco the first time they want, or they think they want to have the experience that those people are having with the nicotine. Be like, hey, it's not the tobacco. It's not, have a much cleaner version of this experience and not suffer. It's still an addictive substance, absolutely.
Right.
And we
Well,
all as adults have to manage whatever we consume.
Hmm.
yeah.
But
And
anyhow,
yeah, and I think, I mean, that's a whole wonderful conversation as well. Like, it's so easy to toss addiction at so many things. Like, I
right.
must go to CrossFit every morning. And people who don't do that think like, oh, it's an exercise addiction. And to me, if you're leveraging something like a nicotine mint or nicotine gum, and it is not causing harm to you in one way or another, and it's a tool you're choosing to use, to me that's very different than the person who knows that cigarettes are doing all of the things cigarettes do to them and they can't leave
Right.
it alone.
Yeah.
But I think the first part of that, the first step in that, well, we actually did our own little R&D on a clean nicotine gum, and
Oh,
it
interesting.
was yeah, and I just,
Interesting for sure.
well, because I love nicotine gum. Kyle didn't remember, but he actually introduced it to me. He
Yep.
was dating an endurance runner who was using it, and apparently it was a big part of like
Oh.
an endurance running community. And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Sister, take this little piece of gum and just take this little tiny bite, and it's gonna make your tummy feel funny, but hold on for a minute, it's gonna feel good."
It was like half of a 2 milligram or a
So,
3 milligram or something.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
practice was great. And then I recall Ben Greenfield talking about how if someone
Mhm.
just made a clean nicotine gum, like none of them are clean. None of them are clean. Even Lucy, I believe it uses sucralose. Apologies,
Mm.
Lucy, if I have that wrong. You have a
Right.
great product. But what I found interesting when I was going through this whole process, it was the beginning of COVID, and I had to get all these permits and find out what we can put on the label, not on the label. And I ended up calling everyone I was told to call, but I called the Office of
ATF.
Tobacco and Firearms.
Wasn't
And
it ATF? Yeah.
it was during COVID, and the guy was at home. He's like, "Yeah," he's like, it says tobacco, but we don't have anything to do with that anymore. Like, we're checking for bombs and we're checking for information."
So fun. But that's who they referred us to. It's like nobody knew who to talk
Nobody
to.
knew
It
how.
was go to the
Wow.
ATF about nicotine. It's like, really?
Well, and what they did is
Okay.
they ended up
Wow.
reading the same piece of legalese that had to do with it's nicotine from tobacco and still attached to tobacco. So basically, they couldn't tell me, "Yeah, go ahead and do that." But basically, there's a gray area in the law that kind of allows for nicotine gum at the moment,
Mm.
at least. But it has to do with where the nicotine comes from. Like if it's lab created versus derived from, say, peppers or.
And there's only like one source, right? Isn't there only one place that like legally produces that the compound or something, or who owns it? I forget. There was some. It's hard to access for
No,
somebody who wants to just start a business. Anyhow.
No, what you're speaking of is if you're going the pharmaceutical route, the people who make Nicorette basically make all of the nicotine
That one.
except
Oh.
Lucy. And I tried to do R&D with a pharmaceutical company in Sweden, and the guy was great. We had this amazing conversation. We had no business thinking we could come up with the amount of money for their kind of R&D. It was like, it was like
But
800.
this is how you get information. You have to ask the question.
But I learned a lot, and that was basically the only other company in the world who could do it pharmaceutically.
Mm.
But there's other routes that you can go. Anyway,
Too busy, not enough time, but super
enough
interesting.
time.
It's another route that is super interesting.
but
Yeah.
point being, nicotine, how it works for me, it was a whole brand new thing as well. Both of our parents smoked as kids. I
Mhm.
never wanted anything to do with it.
Right.
Never would have allowed the conversation. But I, again, listened to Ben Greenfield talk about it. Kyle had introduced me to it, and now it's just another nootropic tool that's
Yeah.
really fun to leverage. And again, that kind of brings it back around to with Keto Brainz. Some people may be feeling it more than others, or feeling it more immediately. I think there's so many people, even now, clearly not in the ketogenic space, but there's so many people now who still feel that they need to fear the very foods that are going to get them the most choline for acetylcholine production and for the health of the phospholipid membrane. So if you've got someone who we've got friends' moms who are just like, they think they're on drugs when they take it because they've probably been so low in dietary choline for so
Been
long.
afraid of saturated fats and cholesterol for so long.
That
Yeah.
that it hits them right away. And so I think the people for whom it's more mild probably have, one, they're not choline deficient to start. They probably have a good amount of choline foods in their diet. But we don't typically have anyone who doesn't feel it, but we'll have varying degrees of, oh my God, this is a new world, to just, I love it every morning and can't live without it. So it's been
the reviews on our site. Actually, we just integrated a review site or a plugin to the site. And it's good because it's really immediate feedback. Took some working, but you get people's real reaction to it. And some of them are like, oh, we left a review because you wanted us to, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Which is great. But then there's people that are just like, you guys have no idea. This is my life is amazing. I gave it to my kid. Like this, that, it's like it's changing everything. And we get excited about it, but it's like it's gonna be what it is for every individual person. And we want it to be this hugely beneficial thing for anybody that tries it.
Yeah.
And that's like that is the pitch. It's just like try it.
Right.
I'm not going to sell you anything. If you like it, you can buy more. That's the pitch.
But the selfish pitch that we joke about, it's not really selfish, is we want more good brains to play with. Let's help all brains more.
Let's have more good conversations. Let's get these brains working. Yeah.
Yes.
If you haven't noticed, we're tangential. We want to talk about all the things and go down all the tangents.
That's what we do on this podcast. I do want to stay on the choline tangent for a second though, because so it sounds like you guys obviously you were kind of driven through past experiences and your knowledge of like how beneficial choline is to include it. But there's many forms of choline, right? There's like phosphatidylcholine and CDP choline, and so I'm curious, was there a particular reason why you chose alpha GPC versus some of the other ones? Or was it just one that you had the most I know that alpha GPC does tend to be a little bit more popular. Like that was the first choline dietary supplement that I was introduced to. So I'm just wondering if there was kind of anything specific that drew you to that compound over some of the others.
So for me, I had used, going way back to the beginning, starting with just like, let me add lecithin to let me take phosphatidylserine. Like, I can take, just choline in a pill. And then I got introduced to CDP choline, and CDP choline for me felt horrible and I could never figure out why. So I steered clear of it. And then I tried alpha GPC and that felt good without any oddness, without any jitters. And, as you do with supplements, sometimes like I'll try something and it doesn't have a good effect. And I'm aware that maybe that was just a bad day. So I'll try it again, see if I have that same effect or if it was just a bad day. So I had been using alpha GPC and I was working with a friend at the time and we were having a whole debate over CDP choline versus alpha GPC. So we both, for a few days took the CDP choline and then went back to the alpha GPC again. And the CDP choline always felt like just a little, like there was a touch of aggro, a little touch of, for me, more of like I want to call it an amphetamine type feeling, it just felt too sharp,
like too high frequency, too like spiky, like kind of.
And what I ended up finding out, and it has been years since I've looked at this, so I will likely mess this up, but there's something about CDP choline that does hit an endogenous amphetamine receptor in our own brains, is what I ended up finding out the difference was. And so for me, he and I are both very high dopamine. We're both COMT-AA. So I've tapped out on dopamine naturally. So in my case, my assumption was that little tickling of those endogenous amphetamine receptors in my brain had me not enjoying the CDP choline.
You think it was too much? Like you were too reactive to that form of the molecule?
Now I'm gonna have to dive back in and make sure that I'm not
just curious.
Messing this up, because I could be. But my understanding is that alpha GPC did not in fact tickle that endogenous receptor that the CDP choline did tickle. So you were getting a bump in acetylcholine from the CDP choline, but in addition to it, you were tickling an endogenous amphetamine receptor that would do a bump in dopamine. And as you and I have learned, Kyle, a fat dose of tyrosine with a fat dose of alpha GPC, I do not enjoy. To me, it's like
together. I haven't done that for a long time.
So for me, Alpha GPC, one, I had been opening capsules and adding it to my coffee, and I knew it didn't affect the taste. I knew it felt good. I knew it digested well. So I had, over the years, tried all of the different kinds. And for me, the acetylcholine was amazing. And even in times where I was playing around with those 1,200 milligram doses for like from the force plate studies, if I started to feel like I had too much, right?
Yeah.
So when I was doing that, I was like, okay, now I feel like I have too much. I'd add theanine to my coffee. And I was like, oh, that is the perfect combination because
nice little balance. Brings it down just a little bit. They're so funny that they are little dials and levers that you can just kind of balance out. And we're so early. We're going to be able to do so much so soon with all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting about the formula that you guys have is that, you know, the other thing that you'll often see, and I'm not going to throw any brands under the bus, but there's a lot of other nootropic brands out there that, you know, maybe they actually are using some efficacious dosing, but they're just kind of like a, you know, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like there's no like reason for the formula. Like there'll be times we look at, well, you didn't need both of those and this does the same thing as that. So why'd you put it in there? Like there's no like intuitiveness behind it. Whereas like this one, you know, I think naturally if you stack caffeine and alpha GPC, and what I've experienced with it personally is that it's just mental clarity and energy, and it's just like very, very strong. But then to put theanine with it, you know, in my opinion, is one of the best uses of theanine is also its combination with caffeine because it can kind of take the edge off of the caffeine. It can reduce, you know, jitters that you might get from it, anxiety. It's one of my most recommended supplements because, you know, working in startups and stuff, I would have a lot of coworkers who would be like, I need coffee for energy, but like I get anxiety when I have coffee also. So like, what do I do? And I'm like, well, first let's look at your coffee consumption habits, but also, you know, for a short-term fix, throw some theanine on there and, you know, you can get a lot of benefit. Yeah.
Totally.
But the one that's interesting to me and that I want to dive in next is the lion's mane. So I'm a huge fan of lion's mane. I've been taking it for like 3 or 4 years now. I used to just take it like as an individual packet. I would use like the Four Sigmatic, or there's a couple other ones out there that I would take. And then I actually started eating it. I had the farmer's market that I would go to in Austin when I lived there had fresh lion's mane. And I remember I reached out to Hamilton Morris, who has an awesome show that was on, I think it was on Vice a few years ago, called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, where he would just break down different. Yeah,
that was
so
great. That was awesome.
I reached out to him and I was like, you know, this doesn't taste that great. Like, what do I do to it to make it taste good? And he actually gave me like incredible advice. He was like, just do like salt, like cook it in coconut oil with like a little bit of salt and turmeric. Yeah. And I was like, holy
prepare
cow,
it like a good food.
Yeah, exactly. I was blown away that you could actually make it taste that well. But what I noticed from eating it was that while it did taste great, and I'm sure there was other benefits with it, I'm assuming I probably wasn't getting enough of the active compound to experience any of the benefit from it because I think, you know, in my experience, lion's mane is a little bit, it's not as a noticeable effect as what you would maybe think from others, but I have always noticed that when I would take it before creative tasks specifically, that I would feel like an enhancement in creativity. I'm not like naturally a super creative person, but like I do all of like my graphic design for social media. So I'm always looking for something that gives me a little bit of edge there. And lion's mane has always given me that. So I'm curious, like the story behind that part of the formula. Because I also don't think that lion's mane is always added to coffee. Sometimes people are taking it in many different forms. Maybe they're adding it to like hot water. So how did you guys get to adding that to the formula?
You know, for me, you know, part of it, so a new supplement comes around, oh, it's great for this. You go, okay, tell me about it. And mushrooms had been big in the industry for a long time. And, you know, I played around with pretty much every medicinal mushroom. And for the most part, lion's mane was always a mushroom that I would recommend to people who were coming for help, who were going through MS, because it's one of the medicinal mushrooms that wouldn't have an immune stimulating effect, but would potentially help with the myelin sheath and help with nerve regeneration. So for the longest time, I always, you know, diabetic neuropathy, any sort of neuropathy, it was one of my go-tos in a stack for people for a certain set of things.
Wow.
And then I think around that time is when Four Sigmatic had kind of started to get big, and then they had lion's mane for their coffee. I'm like, okay, great. And then as I finally stop and go, okay, why are people saying this is good for the brain? So that gets you into the BDNF and the NGF conversation. And then as I got into looking at different genes that can affect how we feel and move through the world, there's a gene that codes for how much BDNF you naturally produce. And again, that might have come, I think Ben Greenfield, he has high production and his son has low or something like that. And then I remember checking my ex's, and he had low BDNF production, and we had midline. And I was like, everyone needs lion's mane.
We're all deficient.
But at the time, we were also doing endurance runs. And so I was really into reading the research around BDNF from endurance exercise and like all of
what's going on there? I haven't heard this yet. What's going on with BDNF and endurance?
Again, this is one where I'm going to have to like provide you.
This is a while ago. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. It's funny. This is a great conversation to have to remember why we initially had these thoughts, because now we have it in there and we love it. But it's like, what was that initial thing that clued us into thinking that would be a good complement to the rest of the things in this product?
No, I recall thinking that endurance run, like actual endurance running, like which would get tricky because if you've never run and you run 5 miles, that might be endurance for you for the first week. But these were studies on actual like endurance runners, hundreds of miles a week, but they had increased BDNF production. And so, when we'd be out running, I love thinking through, I'm making happy chemicals. I'm making BDNF. I'm going to have so much oxytocin when I finish this run. So I was really at top of mind, like, so I've played with the pyracetam and that whole class of, I've played with all of those. And those don't tickle your brain. Those punch your brain and you feel a thing, right?
Definitely.
Not subtle.
Not subtle.
And I've played with these nootropic blends that claim to have everything but don't have enough of anything, and I feel nothing. And so the idea behind Keto Brainz really is, there's structural components to the brain that we want to be sound. And then we want the function within the brain to be sound. So what are the best supplements that we know work, that have evidence behind them, that we can put into a product that's going to support brain structure, brain function, as an
longevity?
In the acute and in the long term. Like, how do I take something that I'm going to feel right away? But to your point, like in the background, with the lion's mane and people feeling it, I kind of wonder if you have lower natural BDNF production, are you the person who feels lion's mane versus the person who has higher production? Maybe that person doesn't feel it. Yeah. I know, I trust what it's doing irrespective of whether or not I feel it. And I want to know that I've got, robust amounts of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And I want to know that my nerves and my myelin sheaths are healthy and happy. Yeah. Yep. And I want them to communicate well. So we need that acetylcholine because we want the speed of neurotransmission to be solid. And the lion's mane to me was just that part of that long-term function and structural piece of what a healthy brain needs. If I could have added stoic thought to the bag, that would have been another missing piece.
Yeah. That's what we're going for. We're trying to get this just check your emotions in a bag, kind of.
Get a dose of Ryan Holiday in a bag too. That'd be great. A little bit.
It's like everybody can benefit from a little bit at least.
The only thing I would add to the formula would be a magic way to help people with that. But
I do love that's such a great way to formulate though, because usually you're getting one or the other. You're getting something that gives you some short-term benefit or just makes you feel something in the short term, but not really anything long-term gain. Or you get something with some long-term benefit, but you're not experiencing anything in the short term. And, to let all of our listeners in on a little secret too, when you're creating something, ideally you want to do both. Like if your goal is to help people, which is very clear that your guys' goal is not necessarily driven around, entrepreneurship and selling a lot of things. Like you guys are driven by helping people, which is, I think the best part about a company. But if your goal is to do that and you're creating products that are formulated with things like lion's mane and, C8 MCTs that you maybe won't feel that much of, I do think you will feel things like alpha GPC and theanine, but you won't necessarily feel as much, but there's benefit to them. The best thing you can do is pair that with something that is also, that's going to provide them something that they feel, because that'll be something that people will take. It's just a great path towards getting, it's almost like a Trojan horse method for
It's
getting
exactly a
people to
Trojan
do what
horse.
you
You're
want.
sneaking it in, but for their
Yes.
benefit, right? It's
For
not
their
Yes.
benefit. Yes.
100%.
Well,
You know you don't want to do this, but trust me, it's going to help you.
and I love
Exactly.
Do it.
that because I get so many people who, and it's typically like CrossFit friends or people who are outside this little bubble of like keto biohackeriness, who like they keep, like, my one friend calls it, he still keeps calling it just that mushroom coffee you guys have. Like, this feels so much different than all the other mushroom coffees. And I kind of gently try to, well, the alpha GPC is, you're feeling this from this, you're feeling this from this, or there's people who just love how it tastes. And, then there's the people who are like, why is it $40? It's just a keto creamer. And then you kind of dive into, well, this is a nootropic that happens to be in a base of a keto creamer.
Yeah.
But it gives many different entry points for different
Totally.
individuals. And honestly, if you just you saw someone use it and you thought it was cool, and now you're taking it and you have no idea what's in it, but you feel great, that's cool too. Like,
That's what I like, is that you can, it's like this somehow subverts the virtue signal. Like maybe you want a virtue signal. And we all, again, I have to give a little more context. We all virtue signal all the time. That's how we communicate. It's just, there's a fidelity between what you actually feel and believe and that which you signal. So like, as long as that fidelity is tight, like, then that's appropriate, accurate, truthful virtue signaling. So even if you get someone taking this just to be like, oh, I'm taking Keto Brainz too, doesn't matter. You're still going to benefit just as much.
Yeah.
Do whatever you can to get people to just feel it for themselves, and ideally get them to take the reins. It's like, it's all just like, here, now you do it.
Yes.
Because
And I think
you're the only person who's ever going to be able to fix yourself or address your own issues, right?
Well, and again, the first thing that has to be in order, I think we've all experienced it in one way or another to varying degrees in life. It's one thing to know you want to make a life change. It's another thing to make the decision, to write the list, to prepare to do it. But
all crucial steps.
But if you're deficient in the key neurotransmitters, if your dopamine is tanked and your acetylcholine is low and you've got anxiety because your GABA is low, that really is a rough place to be in as a human, because cognitively, you know that you want to do X, Y, and Z, but your chemicals can't even, get you to the ice bath or get you to sit in the sun. So to me, it's magical that, these wonderful substances for some people are that first step to going, oh, I want to do this, and now I can today. So
it's a spark, man, for somebody who hasn't seen light in years.
Yeah.
It's just a glimmer of hope. It's such a small little thing, but all they have to do is see a path. They don't even know how to walk it. They just have to see, like, oh, it's working, right?
Yeah. And I think, I love that you guys are bringing that up specifically because, as you guys know, because you guys were the sponsor of this episode, I had Dr. Chris Palmer on the podcast recently, and he was talking a lot about the issues in the mental health space, about how, a lot of the treatments that we're using are, we know that mental health is rooted in poor mental health is rooted in poor metabolic health, but a lot of the prescription drugs that we're recommending are actually worsening metabolic health. So, as the story goes with a lot of modern medicine nowadays, we're not only not addressing the root cause, we're actually making the root cause worse through our practices. And I put a post out about this yesterday on social media, and I had I don't know what her practice was. I don't know where she was on the spectrum of practitioner, but she was kind of calling me out a little bit on it. And she was just like, not everybody is prescribing these medications as first-line treatment. A lot of us are doing really great work, trying to work with like cognitive behavioral therapies and lifestyle changes and things like that. I made sure, as I was talking, I love these things when they pop up. Like, I don't like to argue. I like to gain that perspective. And I was like, you're right. I shouldn't group all practitioners together. Some practitioners are, doing better work. But just so you know, I get hundreds of messages every day from people who are, that's their experiences, that they're getting prescribed these medications right away. And, she kind of came back with this, that there's a need for medication, which I agree with. I'd actually put in the post that one of the benefits of the medications is that, as you just laid out, Molly, you're getting that short-term relief that will create the space that if you feel like shit every single day, you're depressed, you're anxious, you don't know why you feel that way. How are you going to get to the gym, right? Like you can white knuckle it, but like you're not going to do that in a very sustainable fashion.
Exactly.
You know, we need to create space. And that, so as you guys bring this up, you know, because my response to that was I agreed we should totally look for those things, but we need to look for things that aren't going to be harming metabolic health and making the root cause worse. Which I think is, and I'm not trying to say that Keto Brainz is a prescription for people dealing with mental health disorders,
No.
but I think that using things like alpha GPC and theanine and these things that are powerful in the way that they can, you know, stimulate neurotransmitter production, and they can, you know, doing things that can restructure the brain in the long term. Like that to me is a great type of medicine to then combine with these lifestyle medicines that people should be focusing on. So I'm curious, have you guys heard, and again, you know, anything that is said from here to the end of the podcast is not to be taken as a prescription for anything, but have you guys heard any anecdotal stories of people using Keto Brainz or any of the ingredients in Keto Brainz and experiencing, you know, either decreases in some mental health problems or maybe even getting off of their medications or anything like that?
You know, we have, and it's always so, it's always like, I feel like I'm like cheering in the background, but like I can't say
it's almost hard. Yeah, we can't really, we don't want to like push it out there and say this helps this person with this problem, right?
Clearly can't, like part of me wants to be like, I'm like share with the world, but the other part of me is like, oh, that's a lot of, you know, people potentially yelling at me because they're going to think that I'm claiming my product does a thing.
100%.
You know, we do have a lot of people reach out about Keto Brainz use for ADHD in themselves and their teenagers. We also have a number of people who have found, and again, this is, everything's individual.
Purely anecdotal. Yeah.
People who have moved away from certain medications that were trying to help them with anxiety and with focus, and who have found that Keto Brainz worked. And again, it's been one of these scenarios where they're kind of shocked and they reach out and say, you know, I don't feel like I need more of X today. And I'm always really clear is like, you know, that's a whole separate thing. And you've got to work with your practitioner on whether or not you should be taking that. But let me explain how and why Keto Brainz might be making you feel the way you're feeling.
So then you make the decision.
So it's always an opportunity to remind them that, you know, I say this a lot. I'm not around a lot of people, so I guess I don't say it that much. But basically, the neurotransmitters coursing through our brain are the lens through which we feel and experience everything in life. So if one of your 4 key neurotransmitters is imbalanced, your entire world is going to be painted, if you will, in a sadder state, a happier state, an angrier state.
Who people see is dictated by the same thing.
Yeah, we don't just feel depression. We don't just feel this. We don't just feel that. There is an underlying neurochemical something, hormonal something happening leading to that. And whenever these folks reach out, I'm always very careful in how I respond, but it's always an opportunity to remind them that, you know, if you were low in dopamine and acetylcholine and that led to depression, there are a number of natural substances that might work for you or worth trying to tickle those receptors. And
sorry to interrupt, they could be less risky than going for the nuclear pharmaceutical option out of the gate. Not to say that those things don't have a place, because I think they absolutely do. We can talk about their motivations later, but there are absolutely people who benefit from these things. I think the issue is over prescription. It's that like, or incentivization of prescription as well. I don't know to what degree that happens or not, but that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and again, if you don't have stoicism as a medicine, if you will, to put a space between, you know, to put a space between what you're feeling and how you want to respond to it, you know, to me, theanine is the most magical way to put some space between a thing you might want to react to and not react to. So
it's like it's coming at you at like 100 miles an hour, and then like theanine is your peripheral vision. It's like, oh, what's up? You're just waiting for it, and you're like, wait, do I even need to look at you? Nah. And it's literally a barrier. You're like, unaffected.
The answer is yes.
It's always magic. It's so good.
Conversation. Always want to like tiptoe around it. One thing I will say, years ago when I was still kind of like starting to understand the different neurotransmitters, there's a book called The Edge Effect by a man named Eric Braverman.
Okay.
And I was in a situation where I was working in a health food store, just helping people. And I mean, you've got people walking in, like, my husband just died, I'm depressed. Okay,
let me help. How do I help?
Kid working at a store, and people come to you with the things that they don't even go to their family with, and you're left trying to sort out, like, do you need 5-HTP? Do you need to go to the doctor? What do you need? So this book,
you need to sleep.
this book, The Edge Effect, I believe he's actually a neurologist and actually takes patients and actually does neurotransmitter testing, but he has these a series of true false questions that you go through, and all they do is they help an individual understand what their dominant neurotransmitter state is when they're balanced, and which they might be deficient in when they're imbalanced. And it's based on science, not science, whatever. But that was so helpful for me in pairing people with the right potential helper. Are you depressed because you're anxious all the time and need more GABA? Are you depressed because your serotonin is tanked because you just left a relationship? So we maybe need some serotonin helpers. Are you feeling X because you've been on a non-fat vegan diet for 20 years? Like, so just having tools to help people just understand what those 4 primary neurotransmitters are.
And the roles they play. Yeah.
Roles they play. Like, Kyle has a great story that I don't know if he wants to share or remembers on dopamine. When you were endurance, you want me to tell it?
No, which one? I'm just trying to remember.
You were training for endurance runs. So the dopamine you were receiving from your 20-mile, 30-mile training runs, then you got injured and you couldn't do those runs. And you had a day on your couch where you called me and you were just like the grayest sounding, saddest brother in the world. And I kind of made basically we had a conversation. I was like, listen, you were driving hard towards this goal and you were getting a steady drip of dopamine from finishing these training runs and getting towards your race.
Right.
So I told him, I was like, okay, I just do this for me. I need you to drive up to the health food store and you're going to buy a bottle of L-tyrosine. And when you get home, you're going to open up that capsule of tyrosine and I want you to put it right in your mouth.
And I have to, a little context, a little color. The whole time I'm like, nope, nothing's going to work. Everything's terrible. It's not worth getting up. I'm not moving until I feel better. Like, just completely offering nothing, which is indicative of my neurochemical state.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
What happened? Like, literally, so the thing is, if you're low dopamine and you put tyrosine in your mouth, if you feel better within minutes, you were low dopamine. And we need to figure out behaviorally, dietarily, and supplementally, what are we going to do to help get your dopamine up? And for him,
Huberman has a great story about this too.
Yeah. But you called or texted shortly after and we're just shocked because basically you described it as the lights coming back on.
There's a couple different times in my life where I've had that experience where you're not, it's an acute experience. It's not a nebulous general thing. You feel like very specifically a thing and it's not comfortable or it's not right. And then someone suggests to you or somehow is presented to you, do this thing or take this thing. And against all odds, against all your belief that there's no way this one little thing or this one little action could have any significant effect. Fine, I'll do it. Take it. And the immediacy with which the effect happens is insane.
Yeah.
You literally, I can feel myself become like a different version of myself. It's unreal how quick. And so I felt that with tyrosine. The other one was with BioK when I had food poisoning. And alpha GPC and theanine. Those are the only things that have made me go, well, in current memory, that were just like, that was phenomenal. I'm always going to remember this. Huberman's breathing trick to get rid of side aches. Like, it's like, there's no way. I've been running forever. Side aches, you just fucking deal with them.
Yeah.
You do this simple breathing trick and you're like, no way. This works. It's so funny.
Yes. And
you just got to try. You just got to try stuff.
Exactly. And like for everything, I think that it's a general message from, mental health to every sort of issue that we're dealing with is that we should always look for a natural remedy first, because I
Agreed.
think that, and that doesn't mean that there's not a place for pharmaceuticals, as you pointed out, Kyle,
Nope.
especially in the mental health space. There's absolutely a point where people need to go that route, or else it could be devastating what could happen next, right? So there is a
Hmm.
need for it. But I think the job of a practitioner for whatever health disorder somebody's dealing with is to figure out where they're at on that spectrum, and try to go a natural route. Like, try to look for, in the case of mental health, like you said, if we're suspecting that it's low dopamine, well, let's try a supplement first. If you're suspecting that it's a serotonin issue, let's look at something that can work on that first, and then from there, let's walk down the path. And the reason why that's so important is because the mental health side, we talked about, those pharmaceuticals they have a tendency to worsen metabolic health, and that's one of the reasons why, I forget the number that Dr. Palmer gave, but it's very high, like 80 or 95% or something of people who get prescribed a lot of these drugs are taking them 5 years later still. And a lot of times they're taking them under the assumption that, I'm going to take this for a period of time. It's going to fix me, because we always think that these pharmaceuticals will fix us.
Man.
And there's no sort of, they're not doing any of the lifestyle stuff that's going to fix that root cause, and then they end up worse off. And in some cases, you end up to a point like, you mentioned ADHD is another one, where if you take that for that long, if you take like a Ritalin or an Adderall or a Vyvanse, any of those things for so long, you get to the point where not having it means not being functional. Like, you cannot operate within your day-to-day life without it. So how are you going to get off of it? So I think that it's one of those things where we should always look first, if we can, if we have the opportunity where something has not progressed so to the point that it is going to be detrimental to not go the pharmaceutical route, we should always look at the natural remedy first, and then see. And obviously, we all know that the narrative behind that of, well, there's no money behind that, blah, blah, blah. Well, there is, if we restructure things, right? Like, there's no reason why
100%.
insurances can't be paying for cognitive behavioral therapy, and they can't be paying for supplements. Like, these
Agreed.
nutritional supplements that we're talking about are all things that could be first line treatments for certain
And
conditions.
low risk.
Well,
Low
and
risk and low
risk.
cost.
Yes.
Like, why
Yeah.
not start? It's like if your TV's broken, try and plug it back in first. Don't
Right.
unscrew it, remove the screen, and like start messing with the wires. Just
Yes.
check if it's plugged in.
Yeah. Great point.
Like, it's everything you just described to me is kind of like due diligence. Is
Yes.
100%.
you know, step number like one, it's learning to check in with yourself. Like, this whole like, oh, I woke up on the wrong side of bed, now I'm having a bad day. Okay, let's backtrack. What did yesterday look like? Is there a reason that you feel X this morning? And
A potential reason. Think about it for a second.
do you really need that Red Bull, or do you need to go for a walk and get some sun in your eyes, and then have your tea or coffee? But I feel like, I mean, I'm 46, but I've felt for a very long time culturally that we have a practice of outsourcing everything in our lives to other people, to where we don't learn to trust any knowledge we may gain about anything ourselves.
Yeah.
And now, I'm not saying, like, I'm sure I could fix my car and change my oil. I really don't have time for that. So I'm going to outsource that, right?
Yeah.
But I think we've gotten to the point where we have outsourced aspects of our health that only each of us individually can get in tune with. And to me, the worst piece of this is that people are afraid to try a new diet. It's scary to them. People are afraid to try a supplement that would never hurt them, because culturally we've been trained to, there is a dietitian who tells me what I do with my diet, and there is a trainer that tells me what I do with my body, and I will not poop until the dietitian tells me how I'm supposed to poop. And then people are in this state of anxiety. They don't feel healthy. They're not getting healthier because
they've been trained, sorry to interrupt, to not trust themselves.
Yeah.
The entire culture, currently, parts of it, markets, has incentivized an entirely inappropriate set of incentives. And so everything is backwards.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost the specific point, but yeah.
No, just the whole point is,
More Keto Brainz.
anytime we can give people back a little bit of sovereignty over their health.
Right.
Through like with keto, like, it's so enjoyable, whether it was convincing Kyle to try keto and then having it hit him and going through that with him or other people. it's so enjoyable seeing someone go, oh, this is what you've been talking about. I feel X and I want to continue feeling X.
Yeah.
And it's the agency.
So
It's
good.
the agency factor, right? Sorry, my
Yeah.
point before was like there's this incentive to export your accountability to a third party.
Yeah.
There's a huge market for us, for people who are willing to say, hey, we'll take care of that for you so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Banks are the primary example. We're all so comfortable with banks, and we forget that bank runs happen every 100 years or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's we get lulled to sleep because things are simple.
Yeah.
But when it comes time to be accountable, it's like, well, I thought they were going to take care of it.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to take care of it. I thought I paid that person to take care of it. You have all these thoughts about things that you thought were taken care of, but you no longer know because you've exported your sense of accountability.
Yeah.
We need to regain a sense of agency. And I always come to this point of, if you're not your own point of relativity, you're going to be consistently looking outside of yourself for validation for every single thought and decision you have and make.
Yeah.
You're the only person you're with all the time. And until you figure out how to trust this person, nothing else is consistent. You're the only thing that keeps everything else in perspective. So if you can't trust that, you're going to be all over the place, right?
No, and it's from that place where it's like you need that little bit of foundation, and then you're like, ooh, I'm going to try this. Let's see how this feels for me.
Yeah.
Let's see how, whether it's a new set of physical activities, a new diet, you're going to try psilocybin, you're going to do whatever the thing is. We have to have a little foundation of our own to stand on, to say, you know what, I know what my baseline is.
I did that.
I know that I can test this out.
Yeah, totally. And I think like you're so right. It's like, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It's, as you mentioned, we outsource our problems and complications to other people. We don't trust ourselves, so we feel like it's better off to trust, quote unquote, professional to help make our decisions for us. But also a lot of times we don't believe that we are the cause of our own problems either. I think that's another thing where, we look at,
we've exported everything, all accountability.
It's,
So,
it's
that's their fault
genetics.
too.
It's,
Right.
It's my water supply. It's like all these
It's not
different
me.
things.
It's not me.
We don't want to believe that it's us. And I think the other thing that's interesting too is that in some cases, like mood, I think is an interesting one, that it's not, some people are dealing with chronic issues, right? It's every day they wake up feeling certain ways, but sometimes, and the one that comes to mind is like, women going through their menstrual cycle will experience something during, different phases of their menstrual cycle, but it's only there for that phase, and then it disappears. And I think what happens a lot of times is that it's out of state, out of mind, right? Like if it's like, oh, I felt horrible the last 3 days, like the worst I've ever felt, my mood was so bad, but I woke up today feeling good, so like I'm not going to worry about it until the next month, and then it comes back again, and you're like, oh, I forgot.
That's what you just said. So that
she does this all the time to me.
No, but it's basically, it's like there's so much utility in just understanding. Like for a woman, we don't have a choice but to go through that, right? So there's so much utility in understanding like the evolutionary or the biological roots of what's happening neurochemically and hormonally, and why it might make us feel a certain way. I remember years ago working with a company that sold AHCC, the active hexose correlated compound, increases killer cells. And it was my first introduction to psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology, this crazy word. It doesn't even seem like a word. But one of the things, I ended up on a call with one of the researchers, and he was explaining that basically, there's a part of our cycle where our immune system tanks, and it helps us want to stay inside, and it helps us kind of become people other people don't want to be around because our immune system has to go low.
That was a nice way to say that.
So basically our immune systems have to tank a little bit so we don't kill the sperm. So there's a period of time where the immune system has to go lower, which causes us to not really want to be in public as much, or maybe not feel as
like
shit ourselves. Wow. And then there's the fertile time, and I call it's like, you can tell with women, I call it the mating dance. You can kind of tell when a woman's in a certain part of her cycle. She feels a little better, and she might dress a little difference, and it's, you know, you don't say it, but you can be like, okay, yeah, she's fertile right now.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a good chance. I
There's
mean, because it looks
yeah,
like it.
there's
Yeah.
there's utility in that, and I kind of feel bad for men because men don't have that regular knowledge of, um, you know, if your cycle is regular, you have an idea of what's happening with progesterone and estrogen and testosterone. But for men, unless you're getting tested regularly, you don't necessarily know what's happened to your testosterone. And the same thing, like if you're all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden depressed for a week or a day, your hormones they have their own cycle
Mm-hmm.
of going up and down.
Are there
Yeah.
studies of male hormonal cycles? Has anybody looked at like testosterone cycles or like male cycles of hormones, like just levels? I'm just curious if there is something that is as cyclical,
I
or is it really going to be more contextual and environmental for males?
I thought I thought I read somewhere that it was like a 24-hour cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Exactly.
curious. It's interesting.
Yeah, so it's more circadian in nature
Okay.
than it is like over the course of a month. It's one of the reasons like men's are so much more predictable that it's one of the reasons why men are more often used in research compared to women because
Okay.
it's more you know, even though there's fluctuations throughout the day, it's more predictable and it's you know, it is
Less
affected by
noisy.
your environment, but to not to the same degree.
Yeah.
Looks like my internet's a little sketchy, so quick note to
Yeah.
editor to cut
Mine's
this
been
out.
going in and out. Well, not
Yeah,
in and out, but the resolution has changed, but the
yeah,
conversation has been consistent.
it's good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yeah, just note to editor to cut that out and just stitch this together. But yeah, it's a little bit different, but and that's one of the things that I do think makes it so challenging for women, especially, is that you know for men it might be you know the fluctuations occur within a day. So if you know that like oh I have low energy in the morning or I have more energy in the morning, I don't as much at night, like you remember that because it happens every single day. But what's so challenging for women
Right.
is that you know you get out of this 3 day phase where you feel a certain way and then you don't experience it again for 30 days. So I think what happens a lot is you know
Forget.
women, unless
That's
you're very
funny.
intuitive, you know you're not thinking about it as much. You're just like oh I don't know why I felt bad, but like on to the next thing, I feel good now, and then it comes back around. So I think you know where this
Interesting.
kind of came from was this conversation of how we have to take a little bit more control. And it's you know what's one of the recommendations I always tell people is that you know if you're experiencing things like depression, anxiety, you know different mood disorders, it's so worth it to journal and journal everything that's going on in your life so you can start to make
Totally.
connections. You know, like is it if you're a woman, is it during a certain phase of your menstrual cycle that you feel it? If you're a man, is it you know is it every Tuesday that you feel it because you binge drank on Friday and Saturday and then by Tuesday you start feeling like shit?
Right.
You know, once you start documenting those things, then you make these connections and you realize, oh, the problem is, you know, it's either in the case of like the man example I gave there, it's me, or in the case of like the woman's example, that it's my biology and
Yeah.
there's something I can do about it. Like I can take control of this
That's
in
it.
some way.
Yes.
There's
And
something
that's
I can do about it. Yeah.
exactly. And to me, you know, I think it's hard to say. Like I understand the desire for somebody else to, you know, like to for us to kind of outsource our problems to other people, but to me, I think that being able to have that control yourself and to not have to go to other people for those, not that you shouldn't be able to lean on other people, but like there's
Totally.
something to me that's magical about being able to repair my own body or to know what's happening
It's
when something's
powerful.
off.
It's
Like,
potent. You become an
yeah,
agent.
yes,
You are acting under your own power
Yep.
to affect your own experience.
totally.
It's so funny how clear and how specific we have to make the significance of this thing, but
Yes,
people don't understand. It seems a lot of people are missing that component of like you've got no one to blame for anything but yourself. You've
right,
got no one to thank for anything but yourself. And I'm not saying
exactly.
people don't help you or whatnot, but you are ultimately responsible for putting yourself in the situations you're in,
Yeah.
making the decisions you make. It doesn't matter if like you told me to buy a stock tomorrow because you think it's going to go great and it's terrible. If I buy it, that's my fault.
That's your
Right,
It
choice.
has nothing to do with
But
you. It
it's
was information that I chose to act upon, right?
right.
Same thing with health. Same thing with job choice,
I know.
career choice,
I think
whatever.
what helps people is it's there's no blame to be had. There's just
Right.
responsibility to be taken.
Yeah, I
Because
like
Responsibility
that.
is a better word.
in
Absolutely.
that case, it's like if you end up with a cancer, you know, you may or may not have made a million decisions. It could have been genetic. It's not about blame. It doesn't matter where a thing came from. If it's a part of your life, the only
100%.
choice is to take personal responsibility for what's next.
Which is going to fix
Figure
the
out
thing you're having an issue with?
what's
A
next.
conversation about your experience of it or fixing the thing?
Yeah.
Right.
And with every, I
Just
had
fix the
6
thing.
days.
Skip all that, right?
And all I could do
Oh
was
my God, yeah.
what's next. Like you have to things are going to happen that are directly related to the choices you make, and then things
Right.
happen in life that you could have done nothing about. It doesn't change that all we can do is ingest it and take responsibility for the next step.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about the female cycle and journaling, and Kyle knows because we'll be hanging out and there would just be a day where I'm like, I don't feel right. Like I'm trying to figure out if it was the workout I did or this or that. And it'll be like 5 hours later or the next day I'll be like, oh yeah, it was that. And we're good.
And it's funny because it's like every time, but it always
Yeah.
starts as like, well, that's good because you're not feeling it the first time and immediately saying, oh, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You don't know
Right.
yet. It's like,
Right.
keep your eyes open because
Yeah.
this might be developing. Then it confirms.
Yeah.
And again, with women, it's tricky too, because if men are on a circadian, or if men are on if men's hormones are on a more circadian rhythm, we go to sleep every night and we wake up and it's a new set of data. And if you're on a 1 month cycle, you go unconscious and you wake up and you're still in the same period
Yeah.
of time. And so you have to be looking at a longer tail set of data to get any useful,
But it's so
I guess,
magical.
information. Yeah.
Ladies don't understand, like, once you know what's happening, like, we've got P5P, B6, we've got DIM, we have, there are so many tools that if your cycle's just not this nice, sweet thing, when you understand what's happening and why, there are natural tools and food, eat more kimchi or take some diindolylmethane. Like, we have opportunities to help our bodies go through that cycle in a way that feels better. But to your point, the first step is noting, oh, what I'm feeling is directly related to my biology.
Yeah.
Okay, accept it or go for a run, take some theanine. Like, what's the solution if I don't like how I'm feeling?
Yes.
But the very first part is acknowledging this is another thing that we need to do more of. Like, a thing is in me, I am not that thing. People say, I am depressed. You are not depression.
That makes no sense.
There's a
Right.
state of disease.
I have depression in the moment or now, right?
Yeah. And so acknowledging that it's a thing that's temporarily within you that will not always be there, and that you also have some sort of agency over. But it does start with journaling or just thinking. Like, the space between the space between stimulus and response, the Viktor Frankl quote that I love. It starts with space. You gotta
increase that space. Yeah, live in that space.
Yes, I love that. No, that's amazing. And so I know we got we're a little over an hour, so we can start wrapping up. But I think the main takeaway from this, and what I love to kind of bring it full circle, is that you guys have thought about health in a very interesting way. And you have, you've done a lot of self-experimenting, through the N of 2, that is you guys having a similar gene pool, being siblings, but also the many people that each of you have helped, and especially Molly, who when you were working at the health food store, you guys have had this really interesting opportunity to see the complications that people deal with, some of the solutions that work really well for that. And now you've created a product that allows them to bring back to what you said, Kyle, take agency over themselves, even if it's, I know we talked about a lot about mental health and things that, as we mentioned, we're not getting into prescriptive with that, but even just things like having more energy. You're a parent, you want to be in a better mood and have more energy when you're with your kids. You have that work presentation, you want to perform better. You are maybe, borrowing some stimulant drugs like Adderall from friends to kind of get you through the day, and that's not good for you and you want to do something different. You guys have created a product that allows people to do that. So, I think the biggest thing from myself and our Thinking Health crew, I think, is just that really appreciate the awesome work that you guys are doing, and really excited to see that continue, and see as you guys are, in this year focusing on continuing to get this product into more people's hands, scaling up the business and everything. It's a really awesome thing to see. And I think you guys are going to be helping people in a variety of different ways. So really excited for you guys to do that. And to kind of close out, What are some things that people can do to, whether it's wanting to support what you guys are doing, learn more about what you're doing, where can they go? Is there, a good website to go to or social media channels? Where's the best to kind of learn more and get involved with the Keto Brainz operation?
Absolutely. We're actually putting together a challenge that Molly knows a little bit more about.
Go to Instagram for Keto Brainz. It's Keto Brainz with a Z. Go to ketobrainz.com. That's Instagram is primarily where we play in the.
A lot of good information. Sorry, not factual, but like information snippets in the posts.
Yep.
That are definitional. Anyhow, a lot of good information right at the Instagram profile.
But we're about to if anyone who wants to join, a simple 14-day challenge. I've done these in the past, and it was simple things like do 100 squats a day for 14 days and post it. But I wanted to do something that was a little more balanced. So we are going to be starting a challenge that will have a physical component, probably 100 air squats. But I also want to challenge people and myself to read one full study every day on a topic that they find interesting.
Cool.
And to hit 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight for the full 14 days.
I love it. I'm in. Count me in.
Yes. So the idea there.
It's a good one. I like this one. This makes happy brains.
If you we'd love to have you on Whoop. We're trying to find ways to just things that we have issues with. And hitting 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a challenge. Finding the space in a busy world to focus on reading a full study or even a book anymore can be difficult. Yeah. So totally. We always want to challenge the community to get better, no matter what you're doing, because that's what we're doing for ourselves. So be on the lookout. We'll be posting something soon about our 14-day challenge, and there will be a giant prize. I forgot there's a prize for whoever engages the most.
There's a reason for this, other than the benefits you're going to get from doing the challenge, which is the purpose. But we all like prizes.
So, awesome. Yes, but ketobrainz.com, sorry for the tangent, and also Keto Brainz on Instagram, and we try to put as much education out as we find time to put out there.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure that I'll link to all of those in the show notes, and depending on when this podcast airs, if it's before or after you have launched the 14-day, I'll make sure to link to that as well. And for everybody who's listening, I'm already going to sign up for that because that's exciting. Those are the things that I love to do. And be honest, over the last year, the reading a research study every day has been something that I've gotten a little bit further away from as I've, gotten in a little bit more into, doing the podcast and everything we're doing over at BioCoach. So I'm going to be joining that, and I highly recommend everybody else join that as well. So thank you so much for coming on today, guys. Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Man. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. Enjoy your day. Thank you for having us.
Yes, you guys too.
We'll be in touch for sure.